What we now have is an application that can let us know that we're at the Elizabeth Arden store, ask us for our foundation shade, and then convert that shade into an integer, which is a number, and then it can do an operation to check against all the available shades that Elizabeth Arden has and check if my shade, your shade, is available on the list of foundations that Elizabeth Arden has. Hello Sunshine, and welcome back to my channel, Sunshine in My Code. My name is Matlapeng, and in today's video we're going to be doing programming fundamentals. So we're going to be talking about the fundamental concepts in programming, so you don't need to actually code as of yet. We're just going to be talking through them and how you're going to see them being applied. And these fundamentals are applicable in every language, so you don't have to worry about what to install anything or which language this is for. The first question is actually, what is programming? And programming is essentially writing instructions and giving them to a computer. So you write whatever it is you would like the computer to understand. And a programming language is a language that the computer will be able to what we call interpret, which means kind of understand, unpack, and then carry out the tasks that you have asked it to do. So the reason we program is because we want a computer to be able to do multiple repetitive tasks that we as human beings actually don't want to do. So I am going to put on my foundation. It's Elizabeth Arden. The word print is what Python understands as to say print to a screen. It actually understands what that means, right? So you can't just put anything out there that Python actually doesn't understand, or Java or JavaScript, whatever language you're learning. So these are very specific words that a language understands. And the reason when we say you're learning a language, you're learning the words, the terms, the instructions that that language can actually like interpret or understand. And print just means print something to a screen. And you'll see the opening and closing brackets. That just means that it takes in a value, and that value can be anything. And in this case, we've put in quotes, and quotes just means this is a string value, this is a name, this is a sentence, this is just text, right? It just means that this is text. And we're saying print the text, sunshine in my code, or print the text, makeup in my code. And that's a simple print statement. The next thing we might want to print is something like, my favorite foundation is Elizabeth Arden. And for you, your favorite foundation might be Fenty Beauty. For someone else, it might be Smashbox, right? So that is the name of someone's favorite foundation, but that value can change depending on that person. So we don't want to store that value as is. So we don't want to store that my favorite foundation is Elizabeth Arden as Elizabeth Arden. We'd actually want to store that value in a container or a little name for it, and then we can just use that name wherever we want to actually print someone's favorite foundation. So if you have a sentence that, say for instance, reads something like, hello and welcome to my makeup channel. My favorite foundation is Elizabeth Arden. I really like Elizabeth Arden. You may find that this person is referring to a foundation at these specific points. We can actually store that in a field, right? You would store something like favorite foundation in a variable called favorite foundation, which then stores Elizabeth Arden or Fenty Beauty or Smashbox, depending on what my preference is at that time. And then you might want to store a field like the cost of the foundation, right? How much does the foundation cost? And then you might want to store the shade that I'm in. So it's really important to be able to also store the shade of that I have for Elizabeth Arden. I'm now just going to put on some concealers. I use my old foundation as a concealer, and I find that it works really well. So this is my winter shade. In the summer it becomes my concealer. And that's how variables work. So now you can store a cost of a foundation and the shade that I use for that foundation, right? And then you can say, hello, welcome, hello sunshine, my favorite shade, my favorite foundation is Elizabeth Arden. I'm a shade 24 and it costs, let's say, 599 cents. And if ever I use favorite foundation more than twice, like for instance, if I go, it costs only 599 for my favorite foundation. I don't have to type Elizabeth Arden all over again. I just have to type favorite foundation. If my foundation changes tomorrow, I only have to change it in one place. The next thing we're going to talk about is data types, right? So you've probably now been wondering, I've kind of at some point used codes to describe certain things and not in others, and in this like segment of the video I'm actually going to go into a bit more detail about that, right? So if you notice that when I use the foundation name, I put it in quotes. And the reason I put the foundation name or brand in quotes is because that is a string, right? And a string just means a characters, right? It's a text, and how the computer understands it is that it can be anything, right? So I can put it just understands it as text, right? String text, and you can actually put a number inside a string text. What it does is just treats it as a message instead of an actual number. So for instance, if I go in quotes 25 plus in quotes 25, it adds those two messages together. But if I put 25 plus 25, it actually gives me 50 and not 2025. And that's how strings versus integers work. So a string is a message and an integer is actually a number, and it can do calculations on this number. And integers, if you remember integers from high school math, they're actually just numbers from negative numbers 0 all the way to positive numbers. The next data type is a decimal, and a decimal just stores a number up to a decimal point. I'm now done with my concealer, and I'm going to start using my shade. Because this is a bit of a gooey-ish shade, I'm gonna just start using my hands and not a brush. So what I was saying about data types is that depending on what data type you have, you can perform certain operations, and you cannot perform certain operations depending on the data type. So you can add a decimal and an integer, and it gives you a decimal at the end. So if you add 5 and 5.7, you will have 10.7, right? You won't have any other thing than that. You won't actually just get a 10 integer. And you can actually convert from integer to decimal and from decimal to integer. You can also convert a string to a number. Oh, look how nice that color came out. It's so beautiful. Now I'm gonna do my eyebrows. I'm gonna do with this color over here. It's like a dark brown. It just matches my eyebrows really nicely. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this, a bit of it, and just do this, and then right in the middle of my eyebrow I'm gonna just do that, and then just lightly, so that there's a little bit of product left at the end but not a lot. And this just helps maintain the natural shape of your eyebrows really well. So the next thing we're going to talk about is lists. And how lists work is that, let's say for instance Elizabeth Arden has more than one shade. They have like maybe 20 shades, right? So maybe they start at like 4 and they finish at 20, right? If we want to store all the shades for Elizabeth Arden, the first thing you think is, oh, we'd probably need like 20 variables to store all 20 shades from 4 to 24. However, it would work ideally, right? But what if they drop a shade tomorrow? What if they add new shades tomorrow? We'd have to keep going to update our program, and that will be a little bit annoying. Like eventually you'd start seeing how annoying that is, maintaining 20 variables. Instead of maintaining 20 variables, what we'd actually do is we would have a list, right? And a list just means that you have a list of values instead of having one value, right? A list of related values. And this is really great. In some languages they're called arrays, but in Python they're called lists, but it's the same concept. So from 4 all the way to 24, you can actually put all the Elizabeth Arden, all 20 of those shades, right? And when a shade gets added, we just add to that list, and when shades gets removed, we just remove from that list. We now have a list with all the foundations that we want. The next thing we want to do is be able to print all the foundation lists, right? So we want to show people that Elizabeth Arden is not only an amazing product, like an amazing foundation product, it has a wide range of shades that you will absolutely love, and we want to print them out to this user, to whoever wants to see it, right? The first thing you think of is we're gonna have to go print all the shades in this list, right? And that could work, but it can also be like tedious. Like the whole point of this is for you not to work, it's for the program to work, right? So the thing we would want to say is, for every shade in the list of shades, print the number of that shade, right? That's what we want. We don't want to print ourselves all 20 shades. We want the program to do that, and that's what a for loop is. A for loop will just the program will just look at every shade in that list and print each and every shade. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my highlighter. So I have two sets of highlighters. One is from this contour and highlighter glam. This one is I use it for my nose, and this is the one I use for my cheeks, and that's just because my nose area and my cheek area are like different complexion. That's what for loops are for. They kind of just allow you to do multiple things at once. So all you are doing is printing once, but the program itself will print all 20 foundations. Look at how much bounce this has added to my face. Like, I feel so amazing already, right? So you're coming to Elizabeth Arden store and it's got a list of foundations. The first thing you would want to know is what is your shade? Like, honey, what is your shade? And that's what user input is for. So we would write input, the name of the shade, and we would store user shade in a variable called user shade, and then we would go, that is input, and then the input actually takes a string inside of it, which is the message that we want the user to see to understand what we're asking them to, right? So we're asking you to give us a value, but we need to communicate with you what that value needs to be, and that's what the string inside of input comes from. Input your foundation, your favorite foundation, and then we will take that input and store it in a field called a variable. Those words are interchangeable, called user shade, right? And now that we've got your user shade, we can now, so all input from the terminal, you would be inputting this into the program. It would store it as a string. By intuition, it just stores it as a string, because string is that one data type that kind of encapsulates everything. And then what we need to do is cast it into an integer. So now you've got input, and that input actually, we can cast it into an integer, which is a shade, right? And now the most important thing isn't that we show you all 20 of the amazing shades that we have. The most important thing is if we determine in our program whether we have your shade or not. And these are called conditionals, right? In this case, we would want to go, so we've got our for loop, right? Let's go back to our for loop. We were just printing all the shades, and now that we've got your input, we've got your shade, what we can do is say, if the shade we're looking at right now is a shade that the user actually is, we can print, we found your shade. Thank you so much for watching Sunshine in My Code. Thank you for watching my channel, subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate it. Please remember to subscribe to my channel, share it with your friends, and see you in the next video.